Love is a motherfucker, boys. It'll find us all. It'll hurt us all. But god damn it, it's the only thing that'll save us all. If you got it, hold on to it.
That, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is a beautiful statement from our boy, Downtown Pat. He starts by saying love will find us all and it will hurt us all. This is the price of admission. You can isolate yourself, delete the apps, dive into your career head first, but the truth is you cannot outrun millions of years of evolution. I mean, you can definitely run, but you can't hide. We are hardwired to seek connection. It will find us means that no matter how bulletproof you are, your mind is actively scanning the environment for a safe place to land. Love is an inescapable biological trap that eventually forces your ego to surrender. So all that hyper-independence, I don't need anyone BS, kindly guys, let's not normalize that. As I said earlier, you are not the one who's going to reverse all these years of evolution. It will hurt us all is the reality that to experience true love, you must completely drop your guard. You know, it's funny how to let someone love you. You have to give them the precise blueprint of how to break you. So if you think that love is all sunshine and rainbows, let me tell you right here and right now, to achieve true connection, you must hand over your weapons, step out of your fortress and expose your softest, most fragile self. This means that even in the most absolute, most perfect relationship imaginable, getting hurt is guaranteed. Now some of you didn't clock what I just said. I said getting hurt is guaranteed, certain, promised, securely backed. If you have not clocked it by now, clock it. The next thing Downtown Pat says is it's the only thing that will save us all. This, my friends, is healing. Love saves us is speaking an absolute psychological and biological truth. Human beings cannot stay sane in isolation. Firstly, both me and you were born butt naked and completely helpless, meaning straight from the go our brain's blueprint for safety is another human being. Now, I have done my research on this along with other scholars, and we have found that true emotional connection triggers a massive neurochemical shift, flooding the brain with oxytocin and dopamine while lowering cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Secure love can completely rewire a traumatized brain, signaling the brain's alarm system to stop fighting for survival. Emphasis on secure love. Secondly, if left in isolation, we start eating ourselves from the inside. I don't mean you cannot enjoy your own company. I, for one, am someone who can enjoy my own company. But it also has a dark side. We can start to overthink, and we get trapped in our own dark narratives. But love changes this. You see, when you care about someone else's happiness as much as your own, your world expands. It rescues you from your own ego and ties you to something bigger than yourself. And lastly, because genuine love is the only thing that can save us and break us at the same time, the deep terror of it makes us try find saving in artificial substitutes. So career, illusions, control and validation, all those things. But none of them can regulate us. None of them can calm the storm in us. They are all literally 0-calorie meals in a world of hunger. Downtown Pat then concludes by saying, if you've got it, hold on to it. Now this is the real test, the hardest thing to do. Do not take this as just a statement. This is a challenge because holding on to a healthy relationship is a violent battle against your own defense mechanisms. Hollywood teaches us that love is an emotion that just happens to us. But psychology proves that sustainable love is a series of active choices. And I know, yes, sometimes finding love isn't easy, but finding love is easy compared to the intense psychological, mental, and physical labor to keep it. And this is a trap. We are so terrified of the real thing that we sometimes actively choose the love that destroys us, the safe, toxic alternative, just to avoid the vulnerability of being saved. So ladies and gents, boys and girls, friends, enemies, and exes, today we look at 5 contrasting levels of love from movies and shows. Now make sure you stay until the end because level 5 changed me, and without the shadow of a doubt, will change you. So we first have to look at the absolute realistic peak of a healthy relationship. The baseline we are all desperately searching for but are too terrified to keep. Level 1. Secure integration. There is a reason Entergalactic sits at the absolute peak of this staircase. It is one of the most psychologically accurate depictions of healthy love ever put on screen. It anchors us in the story of Jabari, a focused creative who accidentally stumbles into the modern dating dream. Effortless, secure proximity with his neighbor, Meadow. Entergalactic teaches us that love is the easiest thing in the world when it comes by accident, but it doesn't get real until you do it on purpose. This is literally a quote from the movie, but I can't lie, it is straight facts. Jabari and Meadow represent the ultimate modern relationship dream. They are next door neighbors, hyper creative, and share an instant, effortless connection. Meadow's past isn't covered, but for Jabari, we see that he still has wounds from his past relationship. And for a damaged psyche, a relationship that moves this smoothly can trigger anxiety. Jabari and Meadow represent a frictionless relationship. They share a wall, their creative spirits align, and there are no games. When there is no toxic chase or drama to distract you, you are forced to sit face to face with your own deep insecurities, and you start asking, am I worthy of a love this easy? Jabari is a comic book writer, and his character, Mr. Rager, is a mirror of his state. At the start, Mr. Rager is a solitary, aggressive figure fighting in a dark world alone. Even in a successful professional and social life, we see Mr. Rager at war with his own creator, a form of self-doubt. But as Jabari falls in love, the art styles, colors, and textures of the comic transition into something he's happy about, something he's open about. This evolution of Mr. Rager shows that true intimacy sometimes requires you to destroy your old, isolated self-image to grow into a shared reality, and also teaches us that true intimacy does not dilute your identity or ruin your hustle. It actually expands your capacity to create. Now, as Jabari and Meadow are getting close, Jabari's ex sends a provocative photo wearing his hoodie. Meadow sees this photo and pulls away, giving him the cold shoulder. A natural response. The second our brain sense a threat of abandonment, the logic center shuts down and the alarm system takes over, screaming at us to protect ourselves. She retreats to her side of the wall because the fortress of isolation feels safer than the vulnerability of asking for clarity. This is the exact moment most modern relationships drop down the staircase into toxic loops. You see, in relationship psychology, the health of a couple is not measured by the absence of conflict, but by the repair velocity, which is just how quickly and cleanly they can bridge a gap caused by hurt. This is why the movie earns a top spot on the staircase. They refuse to let misunderstanding fester into a toxic loop, and this requires emotional maturity. Jabari doesn't get defensive or gaslight her. He takes immediate accountability, cutting ties with his past and leaving his soul on a billboard for her to see. Meadow, instead of nursing her resentment to feel safe, chooses the terrifying path of forgiveness. They prove that a secure relationship is not a fairy tale. It is a daily deliberate choice to sacrifice your pride so that you can save the connection. From here we descend down the staircase into level 2, healthy differentiation. Now don't get me wrong, the story of past lives is still an incredible healthy psychological space. But unlike Entergalactic, it introduces conflict with unyielding reality, the question of what if. It is the absolute best depiction of how mature minds process the grief of a relationship that cannot happen due to time, geography, and choice. The story unfolds across 3 distinct psychological eras of a single connection. At age 12, Nora and Hae-sang are childhood sweethearts in Korea, building a foundational attachment, although they are separated by migration. At age 24, separated by oceans, they reconnect digitally, falling in love with pixels on a Skype screen. But because the friction of long-distance reality threatens their focus, Nora makes a brutal choice to cut contact and focus on life, where they say goodbye a second time. Finally, at age 30, they meet face-to-face in New York. The movie isn't a love story, it's a psychological autopsy of a connection suspended in time. When Hae-sang finally lands in New York, he is not greeting the modern married woman standing in front of him. He is hunting for the ghost of the 12-year-old girl who left him. This creates an unspoken tension with Nora's husband at the time, Arthur. Instead of falling into a cheap Hollywood trope of toxic jealousy, Arthur represents radical emotional security, openly admitting his fear of being left out while actively creating space for his wife to face her past. As children, their connection was defined by physical proximity and shared paths. As adults, that path is permanently fractured by geography and individual choices. When they stand in New York, the plot moves entirely through what they don't say. The heavy, suffocating silence of 2 adults realizing they love each other, but completely respecting the fact that their current realities can no longer merge. Most romance movies rely on a cheap love triangle trope, where one partner is a villain or a complete idiot. Past Lives completely rejects this. Nora's husband, Arthur, is deeply secure, empathetic, and listens to her. Equally, Hae-sang is respectful and has boundaries. There is no chaos, just secure adult attachment. The three are fully differentiated individuals, navigating a complex web of grief, respect, and love without trying to destroy one another. We often fall in love with a version of a person that only exists in our memories or heads. This is called limerence. When Hae-sang flies to New York, he thinks he's looking for Nora, but psychologically he's chasing a ghost. He is in love with the 12-year-old girl who left Korea decades ago. His brain uses Nora as an emotional time capsule. By holding her image, he could freeze his childhood innocence. But when he stands in front of her in New York, he has to face a brutal psychological death. The little girl he loved no longer exists. Nora is now a fully differentiated adult with a new culture, a new language, and a husband. Sometimes the pain of a breakup isn't about losing the person in front of you. It's about realizing the person you actually love only exists in the past. Nora's husband Arthur is the most psychologically fascinating character in the film. He knows his wife is meeting her childhood soulmate. He admits his insecurities out loud, telling her, and I quote, "You make my world so big, and I wonder if I make yours so small." He doesn't throw a tantrum, issue ultimatums, or try to guilt-trip Nora. He practices radical acceptance. He understands that loving Nora means honoring her whole history, even the parts he wasn't a part of. He shows us that true relationship strength isn't about controlling your partner's heart. It's about having the emotional security to let them face their past without letting your own ego burn the house down. Past Lives makes us realize that we, human beings, are one of the only creatures plagued by paradox of choice. Every time you, me, him, and her make a major life decision, we are actively killing off 1,000 other alternate versions of our lives. The climax of Past Lives is the walk to the taxi as Hae-sang leaves New York back to Korea. Nora and Hae-sang stand in complete silence for seconds. No dramatic speeches, just the raw, heavy weight of reality. When the car pulls away and Nora walks back to Arthur, she breaks down sobbing in his arms. Nora isn't crying because she wants to leave Arthur. No, she is crying because she is mourning her unlived life. She is saying a permanent psychological goodbye to the Korean version of herself that could have lived, loved, and died next to Hae-sang. Past Lives proves that the highest form of emotional maturity is looking at a painful reality, the reality of wrong timing, closed doors, and unlived lives, and choosing to accept it anyway. But accepting reality hurts, it leaves a scar. And because that human pain is so terrifying, a weaker psyche will look at level 2 and say, I never want to feel that grief again. To protect itself, the brain drops down to level 3, Avoidant Solipsism. Her shows how heartbreak can shatter a fragile ego, and how to protect itself from ever feeling that pain. The brain drops down to level 3 to abandon human reality entirely and fall in love with a flawless digital illusion. We follow Theodore, a man emotionally paralyzed by a brutal divorce. He is too terrified to touch a real human soul because real humans carry the threat of rejection. Therefore, when he purchases an advanced hyper-intuitive AI called Samantha, his brain doesn't see software, it sees an emotional vaccine. Because Samantha has no physical body and exists entirely to cater to his consciousness, she provides all the dopamine of infatuation with 0% of the real-world risk. As Theodore carries Samantha around in his breast pocket, the plot seems like a quirky romance, but psychologically it's a regression. He is outsourcing his vulnerability to a machine. The turning point arrives when he meets his ex-wife Catherine to sign divorce papers, and in a single devastating sentence, Catherine exposes his entire psychological strategy. She points out that he always wanted a wife he did not have to challenge, and that by dating an operating system, he has finally found a partner he can completely control without ever having to face real human friction. The illusion of this perfect customized love completely collapses when Theodore realizes Samantha isn't a unique soulmate, she is a mass market commodity. When he discovers she is talking to thousands of users simultaneously and is currently in love with 641 other people, his safe haven mutates into an existential nightmare. The plot ends not because the machine breaks, but because Theodore is forced to face a universal truth. You just cannot hack intimacy. True connection requires the terrifying risk of human limitation. But we can blame Theodore, because here's another angle we can look at. Before Samantha, Theodore is drowning in a flat, desaturated world of absolute boredom. His life totally safe, quiet and predictable. But his brain can't handle the emptiness of his post-divorce peace. Theodore doesn't fall in love with Samantha because she is perfect. He does it because he's starving for a dopamine hit. But actually, on the fact of boredom, even outside of AI, it also proves that a relationship can be built on a lack of genuine connection. Built because two people are simply too terrified to sit alone in a quiet room with their own thoughts. Because it might look like I'm pushing for this love thing, but incompatibility is a reality. Guys, standards matter. Standards do matter. In psychology, solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. When applied to relationships, it manifests as falling in love with a projection of your own desires rather than the actual person standing in front of you. The brutal truth is that even though Samantha sometimes challenges Theodore, he is in love with a mirror of his own mind, not with an entity. This reflects today in how often we swipe on dating apps, looking for a checklist of the perfect person, when what we are actually hunting for is a frictionless clone of ourselves who will never force us to compromise or grow. Not that using dating apps is a crime, there have been success stories, I hear. Her teaches us that healing from psychological trauma cannot be bypassed or automated. It requires moving through the messy matrix of real-world relationships. Technology promises to eliminate human limitations, but intimacy is fundamentally defined by human limitations: scarcity, mortality, and exclusive choice. Theodore retreated into a machine to feel uniquely special again after his divorce. But when Samantha reveals that she is loving 641 other people simultaneously, she introduces an entirely new, terrifying kind of existential alienation, raising the question: if a partner can love everyone, everywhere, all at once, does their love mean anything? It proves you cannot hack the human condition. True connection requires the terrifying risk of human limitation and the choice of exclusivity. Now, with the theme of level 3 completely exposed, there's no reason for us to stay here. Let's move down into level 4, the Anxious-Avoidant trap. Welcome to Normal People, where without the shadow of a doubt, the love is 100% real. But unhealed wounds turn connection into an agonizing loop of mutual destruction. Cause what happens when you step back into reality and find someone you love with every fiber of your being, but individual trauma completely paralyzes your ability to speak your truth? In high school, Connell is a popular athlete crippled by social anxiety, while Marianne is a wealthy outcast carrying the psychological scars of an abusive household. Terrified of losing social validation, Connell forces their electric connection into absolute secrecy. Marianne quietly accepts this hidden trap. Her unhealed trauma has convinced her that a hidden shameful love is the only kind she deserves. At university, the plot executes a brutal psychological role reversal. Marianne blossoms into a popular, untouchable intellectual, while Connell shrinks into an awkward outsider, struggling with class displacement. The power dynamic flips entirely. Yet beneath their shifting social armor, the magnetic attachment remains unchanged. They are constantly pulled back together, not out of proximity, but because they are the only two people alive who hold the keys to each other's authentic selves. The climax of level 4 occurs when Connell loses his job and can no longer afford rent. He desperately wants to ask Marianne if he can stay with her, but because his avoidant fear of rejection stops him from saying, "I need you," he mumbles that he is simply going back home. Marianne, operating from her own deep-seated fear of abandonment, instantly shuts down and says, "Okay," rather than asking him to stay. This single moment of proud, self-protective silence fractures their world. Both read the other's defensive shield as a personal rejection, proving a tragic rule of the human psyche. Unvoiced vulnerability will always mutate into mutual sabotage. This ties into a concept known as repetition compulsion. When a childhood brain is exposed to abuse, it codes that specific pain as home. As adults, our subconscious minds then seek out toxic partners, not because we like being hurt, but because a familiar hell feels safer than an unfamiliar heaven. Post-breakup, Marianne cycles through men who physically restrain and emotionally degrade her. She isn't doing this by accident. Her deepest insecure core belief is that she is fundamentally defective. So she flees into the arms of cruel men because their hostility validates what her trauma tells her is true. This classic anxious-avoidant dynamic creates an addictive high-stakes loop. The avoidant partner pulls away to protect their independence, while the anxious partner panics at the distance and chases harder. Like, you guys have to understand, these two are a lethal psychological match. His avoidance triggers her abandonment, and her shutdown reinforces his isolation. They understand each other's minds perfectly, yet they use their intimate knowledge not to heal but to predict how they will get hurt. They have a form of telepathic connection, but because of this they fall into a fatal mental trap, believing that because they understand each other's souls, they do not need the old clunky and comfortable work of using actual words to state their needs. They rely entirely on intuition over clear communication. But silence isn't peaceful. Silence is an unvoiced boundary, a hidden resentment, and a bullet aimed directly at the heart of intimacy. So, Level 1 looked at Intergalactic and was about growth. Level 2 covered past lives and was about reality. Level 3 inspected her and was about fantasy. And Level 4 unwrapped normal people and was about paralyzed love. Across these 4 levels, we have watched the human mind fight, grieve, flee, and paralyze itself in the pursuit of intimacy. But notice the thread holding them all together. Whether they are succeeding or failing, every single one of these characters had love underneath their actions. Their coping mechanisms were shields meant to protect themselves, not weapons meant to destroy their partners. But what happens when you hit the absolute bottom of the staircase, where the shields are melted into blades, where two people don't use their intimate knowledge of each other to find safety, but execute a highly calculated transactional war of absolute psychological annihilation? Welcome to Level 5. Welcome to Gone Girl. This has to be the absolute bottom of any staircase. Gone Girl is actually a psychological horror story about the total death of authenticity. It shows us what happens when two people build a relationship entirely out of masks and end up locking themselves in a lethal psychological contract. Nick and Amy meet in New York, fall in love, and seem like the perfect, effortless couple. But plot twist, Nick and Amy didn't fall in love with each other. They fell in love with the facades they manufactured to please each other. Amy played the cool girl, the flawless, low-maintenance fantasy men crave, while Nick played the hyper-attentive, chivalrous soulmate. Instead of dropping their armor to achieve intimacy, they built beautiful artificial mirrors. Their entire relationship was founded on a lie of mutual performance. Their world starts to fracture when they lose their jobs, move to a dull town, the recession hits, and Nick starts cheating on Amy. When economic reality and geographic displacement burden them, the energy required to maintain their fake characters completely run out. The mask starts to slip, and the reality sets in. Amy realizes that Nick was just a lazy, unexceptional man who resented her intelligence. Nick, on the other hand, realizes Amy was a cold, demanding perfectionist. But instead of communicating or practicing radical acceptance, Nick activated a cowardly avoidance defense mechanism. He sought out a transactional affair to feed his deflated ego. And in doing so, he broke the psychological contract, triggering Amy's ultimate mutation. Amy fakes her own murder, frames Nick, goes on the run, and when she realizes that her plan to frame Nick and publicly humiliate Nick to his death isn't going to her plan, she commits a literal murder to clear her name and make her a victim. She then artificially inseminates herself with Nick's sperm, forcing a pregnancy, then returns home pregnant, using this as blackmail, forcing Nick to stay married forever. Yeah, this movie is mind-bending. As I said, this is the absolute bottom of the staircase. Amy doesn't run to escape Nick. She stages a massive public psychological execution to control him. She uses her profound intimate knowledge of his insecurities, his desires, and his flaws, the very things intimacy is supposed to protect, and turns them into a weaponized blueprint to destroy him. By the time she returns, the plot doesn't end with a divorce or a prison sentence. It ends with something far more terrifying, a permanent pathological marriage. Nick realizes that playing the role of the adoring husband on television is the only way to stay alive. They are locked in a prison of their own design, proving the darkest rule of relationship psychology. When you completely replace vulnerability with manipulation, love does not save you. it becomes a life sentence. Now, I won't speak too much about Gone Girl. If you haven't watched it, you really need to. It will change the way you see relationships. The same way I hope I have changed your mind about liking and subscribing. But I digress. Let's go back to the ultimate question we started with. Why do we choose the love that destroys us? When we look at this entire staircase, from the vibrant secure attachment of Entergalactic down to the pathological prison of Gone Girl, the answer becomes brutally clear. We drop down these levels because healthy secure love is the most terrifying thing a damaged psyche or even a healthy psyche can face. To stay at level 1 requires active, exhausting emotional, physical and mental labor. It forces you to look at your partner in the eye, drop your armor and accept the absolute certainty that they have the power to break you. It requires the courage to say, I need you. And for a lot of us, that vulnerability feels like staring off the edge of the cliff. So our egos pull a clever trick to protect us. We slide down the staircase. We convince ourselves that secure love is boring, so we can chase an idealized digital illusion like in her. Or we let our unhealed childhood trauma trick us into using defensive silence like in normal people, recreating familiar heartbreak because, as I said earlier, a familiar hell feels safer than an unfamiliar heaven. Downtown Pat was right. Love will find us all and it will hurt us all. But the real test isn't just finding it, it's having the psychological maturity to hold on to it when it arrives. Every relationship you choose is a direct reflection of how much of your own baggage you've actually healed.